If you haven't listened to the first 6 stories in this audiobook series, I'll leave the links below in order. Also, if you want to support me so I can keep doing this, I have a Ko-Fi page you can visit that has a few extra goodies. And if you enjoy my stories, my website features all of my printed novels and ebooks. The links on there will take you to Amazon. Some of them spoke English, but at the moment she was surrounded by a language not her own. Her display was set to this country's tongue, so translations of voices near her would scroll across her vision. She hadn't even tried to keep up with these conversations, however, letting the sentences type themselves from left to right, linger but a second, and then fade away. At street level, ground zero, she was staring straight up from the bottom of this well of commercial towers and high-rises. Smothered by the echoes of voices and idling gasoline-powered cars, Bekka muttered, "This is unreal." "Our connections tend to be very talented," her host stated. Lifting her left hand, extending her arm above her head, she aimed her index finger at a point centered between those surrounding building faces and said, "Somewhere up there." Then she swept her arm to the left and down until she was pointing toward the evening sun. "To over there." The way the skyscrapers blocked out the majority of the sky, the wide avenue cutting through them happened to be aligned with this part of the sun's cycle. All Bekka and the rest of the populace could see was a tall, vertical band of that spectral moment. "Easy enough for it," her host commented. Still staring at the array of colors, Bekka replied, "Our route's a bit more complicated." "But the blockade will unknowingly give us an advantage," her host added. Because her head was tilted backward a fraction, she broke from the hypnosis when she happened to receive a translation of some marquee a block down from this intersection. It arrived as big and bold as the sign was from her perspective. Captured, she then scanned the rest of the billboards down that section of the avenue. The neon typesets, or broad strokes of color, posed as backdrops, while her focus was on the generic font popping up in front of them. "Strange, isn't it?" her host asked. Grinning, Bekka asked, "Which one? The name of that clothing store or the food they're serving at that other one? I still don't even know how to finish that word." "I meant the people," her host answered. "Don't like your own citizens?" Bekka asked. "Look at them," her host said. Bekka snickered, drawing her focus back from her distant goal to observe some of the people around her. "You wouldn't have thought a crisis was happening nearby," her host continued, "but I'm certain most here have heard the news." "They probably don't believe it'll get that bad," Bekka said. "Nobody ever does," her host stated. So the crowds moved along the sidewalks like they always had, past one another on the crosswalks from one side of the street to the next, while the cars sat idle, waiting for the light to change. Funny, Bekka thought, that not a single pedestrian looked up before leaving the sidewalk. Motivated by others ahead of them, they had yet to consider that the intersection was completely devoid of any cars. Had been for a few minutes now, whether as a mob or a few trickling on by, all crosswalks were given the right-of-way. She thought it would dawn on some of them that something was wrong when they'd bump shoulders with others arriving at the same destination at the same time as them. But no, they kept right on going. She smirked. "So, the program is already set in place?" "As per the plan," her host replied. Bekka looked down the eastern section of the avenue. "Then that must mean..." That I'm close by? Another voice commented. The new arrival was being broadcast from the pods in her ears, and, like previous missions, her host could hear it as well. Bekka's lips stretched into a broad smile. So how close are you? Like 30 or so seconds from passing the exit to your location, Alex answered. Ha, I'll end up passing you later on, Bekka taunted him. Yeah, Alex admitted, and a lot faster than 75 miles per hour. You still haven't told me who this biker dude is, Bekka said. And I'm still not gonna, Alex replied. He's almost to your location. You'll hear him pretty soon. You're dressed for the occasion, right? Psh, you know I am, she said, memories of a past mission flashing through her mind. Clashing with everyone around her, Bekka was clad in a D-Air 2 lady performance set of racing overalls. It wasn't just the way the leather material acted like a second skin that made her stand out, however. It was the color scheme. A dominant neon blue with a few white stripes where the different pieces fit together. The hardened sections, shoulder pads, and knee pads were a charcoal gray. It's still hard to believe that this suit actually has airbags built into it, she said. Can't even feel them, can you? Alex asked. Well, Bekka replied, after seeing a few crashes on the racetrack, I'm well aware of their existence, but still. The other guy won't be wearing the same type suit, Alex said. Bekka squinted. That's supposed to be a hint? For what? He asked. For who it is, she said. He chuckled. Is it? You're so mean, she said, still grinning. Got the package, right? He asked. Bekka patted the part of her suit over her stomach. Got it. What about our wizard-class hacker? Oh, he got out of there as soon as he sent the file up, Alex answered. Took a little longer than expected, but that's understandable. And there was nothing wrong with it? Her host asked. It was completely intact, Alex reassured him. He confirmed the transfer before he destroyed his copy. Guess you're on the run too? Bekka asked. Yep, Alex answered. Gotta catch a train. Well, I'm feeling left out just standing in place like this, Bekka huffed. Not only you, her host said. Those sitting at the traffic lights are growing frustrated. Several have sounded their horns and continue to do so. I even hear some of the drivers shouting from their vehicles. All that shouldn't drown out the bike coming your way, Alex offered. Are you tracking him? Bekka asked. Of course, Alex answered. Then how far away is he? She asked. The accumulation of the voices storming that city block, and the neighboring two, was interrupted by a faint, high-pitched rush of air. It pricked Bekka's ears, and she tried to follow its source. Her search brought her attention down the eastern side of the avenue once again. Since the eastbound vehicles were waiting in front of her, a span of several blocks of the two lanes was totally clear of any traffic. From there, an electric squall rolled toward this intersection across the faces of the buildings. I think, her host began. Wait, yes, that's him. Spot him? Alex asked. As soon as Bekka saw the small moving object rushing her way, she wore a wry grin and responded, Yeah, and he's going down the wrong side of the road. Yeah, Alex offered. I mean, since it's open now, right? Bekka snickered. So the mission is a go. Ha, it's been on, Alex laughed. The motorcycle roared its way toward the intersection, despite the pitch of its engine already falling. The rider dropped it into a lower gear. There was the click and the sudden jump of whining RPMs before falling once more. Still, Bekka thought, the guy was coming in pretty fast. Well? Alex asked. Well, what? Bekka questioned. Still don't know who he is? He asked. What, am I supposed to now? She asked. Her host began. The motorists here are growing quite agitated. Bekka ignored the chorus of blaring horns and shouting from the cabs of the nearby vehicles. Was it about the rider she was supposed to recognize? Actually, Alex said, that was a trick question. Bekka blinked. What? Alex chuckled. Come on, no way is he gonna wear something somebody might identify him with. He was still chuckling in Bekka's ears when the biker rushed through the intersection, having angled his bike to head straight for the corner she was standing on. The pedestrians around her had already been frozen by the spectacle, but now that the guy was racing right for them, they hurried to clear the space, leaving Bekka by herself. Oblivious of everyone else's reactions, she was still trying to take in whatever details she could of this guy before he arrived. Was Alex telling the truth? In the second and a half left before he reached her, she studied the motorcycle itself. She didn't have to guess it was a high-performance racing bike, but it could have easily been one that was picked solely for this mission, and a biker who was recruited by their organization through Alex's connections had to have been vetted long before now, right? Sure, there were members who could handle a bike like this, and she had met some of them, but because this was mostly Alex's doing. The bike's engine revved again just before the rider clamped down onto the front brakes. The rear end went airborne, right as the front tire froze in place. During the moment the bike stood vertical, the rider was tilting his head back, his focus on Bekka never broken, even when the bike was pivoting, bringing its left side around. Right before it aligned itself with Bekka, the rear end was dropping. When the back tire struck the asphalt, the body bounced upon its suspension, and then the rider stuck his left foot outward. The bike tilted a few degrees, and then the driver placed his foot flat upon the road. Sitting at idle, the resonance from the engine slapped at the nearby building faces, nearly drowning out all of the blaring horns. Bekka couldn't hear anyone shouting from their vehicles anymore. The low frequencies churning the cement of the sidewalk rolled up her body and shook her stomach with each cycle. Taking his hands from the handlebars, the rider reached up and touched the back corners of his visor. Activated, it slid upward via the inset tracks on either side of the helmet, revealing the guy's face. Well, mostly the area around his eyes and the top half of his nose. Catching what features she could, she tried to sort through what thoughts were instantly available, but... "Well, hey there, little missy," the rider said, and she thought she identified his accent. "You wouldn't happen to be looking for a hot rod, are you? Bet you don't found one, right?" Taking a quick study of her uniform, his eyes brightened and he cheered. "Nice get up. You made a believer out of me, yeah? Ain't one to mess around, are ya? The real deal." She didn't respond, clueless that she was tilting her head and squinting at the man, her lips drawn inward, as she considered him more. Unfazed, the rider continued, "Oh, but wait, look to be missing something." He twisted and reached back for the blue helmet strapped to the end of his seat. "And what's this? How about that?" He pulled the strap loose that bound it in place. "There's one right here, and wouldn't you know it?" Holding it in his left hand, he presented it to her. "It just so happens to match your choice in color." It was suddenly apparent to her that he was leaning toward her with something in his hand. Breaking out of her thoughts, bringing herself to the present, she reached for the helmet. Oh, yeah, thanks." "The name's Darren," he said, resting his palms on his thighs, flaring his elbows outward, and he straightened his back. "Oh, but most people know me as Derringer. If you like that one better, I suppose it's alright if you call me that. Only," and he winked, "not so loud with it, eh?" Leaning toward her, he lowered his voice only a little to finish with, "I'm supposed to be in disguise." He then pulled away, laughing. Derringer, she thought. Derringer, like the gun? Something started to click, and she muttered to herself, like The gun. Darren nodded and pointed toward the helmet she was still holding out in front of her like she had just received it. Your mate can hear us both in that. From here on out, we ain't got a shot at one another. Makes this a whole lot easier, know what I mean? He gripped both handlebars and pumped the throttle. Bekka flinched out of her stupor and lowered the helmet near her stomach, her eyes fixed upon the center of the bike, captured by its rhythmic shudders. It was a dual sport bike, made for on and off-road racing, though the body was bulkier than usual for its type. Her eyes drifted over to the rear tire. Instead of the accented treads found on most dirt bikes, the treads were tighter to the surface. The grooves between each block were wide, giving the tire a sleek, zigzagging brick wall look. Hop aboard, girlie, Darren cheered, and hang on tight. Like the gun, she muttered under her breath again. It's time, her host stated. We don't have long. Right, Bekka replied, looked down at her helmet, and then slipped it on as she stepped over to the bike. I never asked, Darren said, while she slid along the seat, pressing herself against him, but I right believe this pause on the traffic system ain't gonna hold much longer. Let's make ourselves scarce, shall we? Bekka noticed several things while she was fastening the strap underneath her chin. One was how much sound was being canceled out by the interior material of the helmet. With that, the second thing was the beep in her ears, signaling the pods were now tied into the helmet's communication software. She was aware of Darren's light breathing coming in so clear and crisp. The third thing came after she realized the only external sound she could hear was the bike's engine. Her vision buzzed during each peak of its cycle. The faces of those motorists at the front of the traffic line seemed to be happening somewhere else. The intensity of their expressions and how animated some of them gestured didn't match the sounds she was getting. In fact, the expected sounds were missing. And so it begins. Darren's voice was trapped right there against her head, but then everything erupted below. The engine's cry shocked her vision. Darren's right elbow was pumping up and down, and his back flexed right before her eyes. She melted into the bike's gyrations, which stretched out into a rise in pitch and speed. Her arms tightened, and she realized that they were wrapped around Darren's upper body. They had reacted to the force that was trying to pull her off the bike. Darren was bringing them to the other side of the street and turning onto the westbound lanes. Each tilt of the bike tugged her away from the turn at first, but she didn't let her arms go slack. Then they were shooting down the middle of both open lanes. With the left side of her helmet pressed against Darren's back, she was facing to the right, watching the blurred details of buildings flying by. The occasional breaks were quick glimpses of the intersecting streets where other lines of traffic were stopped. Possibly holding her breath, she couldn't blink, trying to take everything in. Now toying with the fact that none of the passing business signs were being translated across her vision, she remembered something. Not about the races, but the first time she had ridden a racing bike as a passenger. A certain trust had to be exercised. The true countdown begins on the bridge, right? Darren asked. I'm monitoring things up there, Alex's voice replied. And so far, we're still calibrated to our numbers. One program is successful. No delays for you guys just yet, but once you're out there in the wild, no telling what can happen. Shouldn't be a problem at all, Darren cheered. And this duel will be fair on all accounts. Derringer. Bekka played the guy's other name through her head once more. She knew a Derringer, one with that specific accent. The pitch of the engine's whine rose and was accompanied by the first sound she discovered that portended the bike's arrival, a whistling of air, but now it was changing, from a piercing noise to a series of electronic swipes at the air. The pitch of each beat was higher than the previous one. She was familiar with this sound. Every time she watched the race on the flat screen, especially when the perspective was from one of the racers. It accompanied the bike's acceleration. "But I gotta admit," Darren continued, "this'll be my first time racing a satellite. A right shame we can't see it." "True," Alex responded. "Even if this plays out like we hope, it's still too early in the day." "But we can still make a wish, right?" Darren cheered. "Do people still do that?" Alex asked. "Well, of course they do," Darren laughed. "People all over the world wish for something. Ain't that right, Miss B?" It took a second for Bekka to realize he was referring to her. The left side of her helmet was still pressing against his back. Having forgotten about the passing blurs, she was listening to their short conversation. Now that she was invited, she popped her head upright and was about to answer him with every bit of excitement that was building up within her. But as soon as she faced into the sun, she froze. Even though the visor on her helmet was tinted a warm green, she squinted into that brilliance. The tapestry stretched toward the heavens, bordered by the last towers on either side of the avenue. Her excitement meter was full, and despite almost every muscle in her body going taut, she didn't shout her response. She just smiled and thought, "Derringer the trick shot, always outnumbered, never outgunned." "And some wishes come true," she breathed. "Right on the money," Darren cheered, and they raced out into the sunlight. For a few seconds there, Bekka felt weightless. That tug on her stomach when going into a quick drop, how she thought she might have lifted off the seat an inch or so, and the satisfied decline in pitch of the bike's engine. The glare of the sun shifted right before the tires barked against the asphalt, and Bekka was greeted with open sky. The tug was still there, however. The bike's front end was tilted down, so she and Darren were facing right into the sprawl of land below. Having left the foundation of the city, they were cruising along a bridge with a shallow slope. Like the avenue at their backs, these two westbound lanes were separated from those heading east. Instead of a wide concrete curb, there was open air between either bridge. "Ha ha, look!" Darren laughed, nodding toward the left. She was already looking at the other bridge. The entire length of the downward slope was filling up with cars, all forced to slow down. "Poor souls don't know what they're in for," Darren added. Bekka followed the bridge all the way down until it and the one she and Darren was on leveled out. From there, they both ran straight for miles just above the forest covering this corner of the continent. Along the way, exit ramps peeled off to spiral down and disappear among the trees. From this high up, she thought she'd be able to see all the little villages, but most were hidden. The ones she could see exposed a portion of their larger buildings, which were nothing more than small clusters of white dots here and there among the dominant green. "Look there," her host said, "to your right." Switching from the left side of Darren's back to the right, she found the shoreline. It stretched further north before curving more to the west. There in that change was an island sitting several miles out. It shaped itself along with the curve, forming what Bekka could no longer unsee as a banana. There weren't as many trees, maybe because the concentration of infrastructure had taken their place long ago. She understood there were several ports along the north and western sides, but the towns and hamlets she could see on this side of the island got as close to the edges as they dared. Any further, and one might think the little nation was on a flotilla instead of real land. "And to your immediate right," her host said. Daring to turn her head further, looking out across the sea, something was cutting at a downward slant through her vision. She spotted the tall concrete pillars supporting another highway just before it made a hard curve to the north. Then it went into a downward spiral, disappearing below the blurry barrier of the bridge she and Darren were on. That's where Alex is, right? She asked. This is correct, her host said. She scanned the shoreline back toward the island. I can't see the train track because of the trees. Don't worry, her host responded. They'll show. They've got nothing else. Whoa-wee! Darren suddenly cheered. Forget the train. Our opponent in the heavens may be a fast one, but I right believe we're getting a head start now. As fast as they were going, Bekka was reminded of the bike's angle having yet to change. Just how long was this slope? The sound suppression of her helmet pointed out the rise in volume of a high-pitched noise coming not from the engine, but from the tires. Dropping her gaze to the bridge underneath them, there was no distinct texture, only a solid gray color that she couldn't help but question. Even with the effects established by the speed they were traveling, the road shouldn't have appeared fake. Any moment now, and she'd spot the pixel distortion from this simulation. Until then, she had to cope with the fact that every sensation was not to be omitted. In just a few seconds, she and Darren would reach the bottom of the hill at a rate of over 100 miles per hour. She wondered if there was a way she could tighten the muscles of her abdomen enough to keep her stomach in place. Too bad for her, she didn't have enough time to try. Here we go, Darren cheered. She gasped when the bike leveled itself with what felt like a sudden dip. Not just her stomach, but she was pretty sure her brain tried to drop out of her body. The seat pressed upward, threatening to split her in half, and all she could think to do was squeeze her eyes shut and hope she came out intact on the other side of this stunt. Oh yeah, that's good stuff, Darren exclaimed, despite Bekka's vice-like grip on his upper body. I'd like to see it catch up with us now. Ain't got a chance. Just a little update, Alex began. I felt sorry for all those people we left behind, so I went ahead and lifted the hold on the traffic lights. Ha! Darren barked. That's supposed to scare me? Alex chuckled. Nah, just thought it might clear your conscience a little. What a guy, Darren cheered. You're all right, mate. Actually, Bekka's host spoke up. Wouldn't it have been better to keep them isolated? I'm not worried about them running into the blockades, but anyone headed west could potentially drop down to the grid below. I have seen no attempt from the local authorities to reroute traffic. We don't need any extra hindrances to this plan. Well, Alex replied, then it'll be the blockades they can be mad at instead of us. If anything, that'll show them how serious the situation is, and they just might start caring a little. The way I see it, Darren began, we just gotta be faster than everybody else. Ha! Bekka snickered. I can still see the island. Darren took a second to glance that way. I imagine they're the type to not be all that shy. Racing along the tops of the trees, the part of the forest stretching north before stopping at the sea had hidden the shoreline from them altogether. All that was left to see of the island was the few towers that stood taller than any of its other structures. At night, her host began. Lights shined from the tops of those towers, guiding all the ships to the ports. Instead of old-fashioned lighthouses, huh? Bekka asked. For a moment, her host didn't respond. Then he said, My uncle told me of a time before the towers when there was no light pollution. Along the edge of the sea, the sky was endless. Bekka was silent. It was Alex who commented, Wonder how many sentiments we've lost along with previous generations. Indeed, Bekka's host said. Sentiments, Bekka mused. Such were at the heart of this mission. Well, lady and gentlemen, Darren announced, it's a fact Miss B and I have passed quite a few exits already. I know we talked about 3 of them. Less than a minute till the first, if my calculations are correct. Been counting them, huh? Alex asked. Well, Darren answered, something like that, yeah. A sudden blur goes by on an otherwise consistent stretch of road, and I suppose I can ignore him for now. Bekka saw this as her chance. But you're not one to miss your mark, right? Darren laughed. I aim to slide right through without a scratch, Miss B. She knew he would respond with those very words. It wasn't the first time she'd heard him answer a reporter with the same phrase. They always wanted to set up one of their last questions in order to get that quote from him. I'm sure it'll delight you to know, Alex began, that our satellite is entering the mesosphere. What? Darren laughed. Ain't no more propellant in that thing? That there was any at all in a derelict satellite is a miracle, Bekka's host responded. Yeah, Alex agreed, and our hacker had to use it all. That's still so wild, Bekka muttered. Calculations like that, her host responded, and he never worked in that field as a professional, or so he says. Yeah, Bekka replied, but the fact that he was able to hack a freaking satellite. Gotta admit, Darren said, that's pretty rad if you ask me, and here I am benefiting from that miracle even now. Course, ain't like I'm gonna be able to brag to anyone about it. A right shame that, haha. Well, Alex said, it's gonna be short-lived either way. The satellite is already well past re-entry. Best case scenario, it'll start burning up in 10 minutes. Once that starts, we'll have a window of about a minute and a half, if need be. After that, the transmitter will be gone. Oh yeah, Darren replied. We'll be done here long before that happens. Guaranteed. So when do we do the whole slingshot thing? Bekka asked. Call it, Alex, Darren said. 5 seconds till our first exit. 2 seconds of silence passed on Alex's end, and Bekka was imagining Darren having to suddenly swerve the bike over just in time to take the ramp. Alex responded. We've earned some leeway. Skip that one. Bekka heard a click from the bike, and Darren pushed the throttle. When the engine revved up, it was then she realized he had backed off their speed. No doubt he had been preparing to make the turn at the last second upon Alex's instructions. He would have been able to do it too. Derringer the trick shot. Now that they were in the clear, she had to tighten her arms around him again. No way this was real. She was grinning ear to ear. Maybe her host felt it. Any signs of the train, Alex? Her host asked. I'm on the ground now, Alex answered, upsetting some of the locals. Doubt this little road has seen a vehicle like this in quite some time. Got nothing but dust in my rear view, but I can see the track to my right. Nothing on it at the moment. You sure you want to take that path? Bekka's host asked. It really isn't made for vehicles at all, especially for a van. There are some rough patches further in. Heh, Alex chuckled, already feeling some of that. Don't let it get you down, mate, Darren cheered. Just glide right over those potholes and you might not feel a thing. Too many quick turns, Bekka's host said. I wish you could tap into the station remotely. Not caught up with the rest of the world yet, I'm afraid, Alex offered. A safety measure, Bekka's host insisted. Certain to keep that country's business private unless otherwise needed. But on the bright side, Alex said, I'm just 2 minutes away. What if the train doesn't stop? Bekka snickered. They'll have to, her host answered. No matter the situation, those still loyal to my uncle's council are workers there. Better still if they see those on the train for what they represent. Which is why doing some name dropping will secure me a seat, Alex commented. Hope you ain't lost track of time there, Alex, Darren said. Exit number 2 is coming up at a rate of knots, and I'm getting excited. Eager, are we? Alex chuckled. Don't you know it? Darren laughed. Well, you, sir, have earned yourself some more leeway with all that vigor, Alex responded. Skip this one, too, Darren gasped. Look at it this way, Alex answered. This makes things easier. Only one option remains. Just maintain that speed. Oh, I can feel it looking out for me even now, Darren cheered. "Just you wait. We're on the way." Bekka dared to lean over a little further to the right. She wanted to see past Darren and try to spot the target exit. Since Darren was acting as a sort of windbreak, sticking her head out like that, she caught the blast of air immediately. Her upper body jolted when her head jerked back from the collision, and she was glad the helmet took the majority of the blow. "Well, all right," Alex cheered in her ears. "I'm seeing the station just up ahead, and wouldn't you know it, the road I gotta turn on to take me to it is just as narrow and bumpy as all the other ones." "Can you spot any of the workers outside of it?" her host asked. No," Alex answered. "Think they're on high alert?" "Can't imagine why," Darren laughed. "And the satellite?" Bekka's host asked. After a second, Alex responded, "Still on course." "Music to my ears," Darren cheered. "We're about to take our exit." Bekka snickered. "Hey Alex, you're not worried this has been smooth sailing so far, are you?" Darren pulled back on the throttle, and she felt the change on the grip of her body. "Oh, you know me," Alex answered. "Always a skeptic." "Hang on, Miss B," Darren said. "Gonna have to get a little low now." Bekka was already attached to him like she was his backpack, so she didn't know what else she could do to prepare. However, thinking back on many of the races she watched, she had a feeling how he was about to maneuver the bike now. "Here we go," he announced, and the bike tilted on its right side. Darting away from the center of the lane, it slipped into the pocket of another that appeared out of nowhere. A single lane more narrow than the bridge, and was bordered by the same concrete walls. It was fixed into a constant curve. Bekka's eyes were wide, taking in her new limited world at a slant. The road was trying to act as a wall as well, positioning itself mere inches from her right side. Her head was slightly turned in its direction, and the speed in which the texture of the road was passing smoothed it out in her vision. She didn't know what else she could do but watch it pass, mesmerized. She and Darren were a solid shape, adhering to the laws of physics. One simple alteration, and they might erupt into something erratic. Closed in like she was, one element caught her attention, even though it too was obeying the rules. The colors reflecting off the asphalt was that of the evening sun. They were spinning in place, alternating between an array of dark reds to shadows. Spiraling, Bekka thought, like she and Darren were. And then the shadows swept over them, erasing the spiral and all but the continued pull on their bodies. Bekka wanted to turn her head the other way to see if she could find the tops of the trees now above them, but she waited. She didn't want to mess this up. She had been able to look further ahead, however, so she noticed when the curvature of the concrete walls began straightening. Then there was a wide mouth of darkness coming up on them. Just before they entered it, the bike moved to sit upright, and everything suddenly made sense to Bekka. It was like those times of disorientation when performing high-velocity flips and such during parkour. She had to commit to the action, let it play out, and be ready to find her feet at the end of it. The jolt hit when they left the asphalt of the ramp and were racing along beaten dirt. She wanted to laugh at that fact, but the new, less subtle vibrations caught her breath in her throat. The bike slanted to the left. She went with it, holding on with everything she had, and then the bike stood upright. Darren jerked the throttle, and the engine cried out. Once again, Bekka had to squeeze down upon him and the bike, so she wouldn't fly off the back. "How about that, Alex?" Darren said. "Miss B and I happen to be down here with you now." "Just arrived at the station," Alex responded. "Still no sign of the train. About to go in and introduce myself." "How about our rendezvous with the heavenly?" Darren asked. "Ain't about to ghost us, yeah?" As he said this, Bekka noticed he hadn't cranked the bike up to full blast. The previous burst seemed to be a celebratory maneuver in light of the new, more open scenery. She could afford to peer around him then and see that the road went straight for a good stretch. They were heading in the opposite direction now, running parallel with the bridge high above and to the right. There were other roads branching off of this one on either side. She could see a good bit of those that went under both bridges and in between the pillars, because the land there was barren of trees for the most part, though, like on the left side, once those roads cleared that space, they dove into the forest, which masked their routes. "The blockades don't come out this far, right?" she asked, mostly directing her question to her host. "Most of them will be north of here," her host answered, and she shifted over to look off to the left side. When one of the branching roads swept by, she tried to glance down it. All she got was a shadowed corridor. "If I understand it correctly," her host continued, "we won't see any of them along this road. Since they're keeping people from entering or leaving the island, our course should be totally open. Only the occasional villager headed south would pose an obstacle, but I'm sure the bike would." "Oh, whoa, what the?" Alex gasped. "What is it, mate?" Darren asked, and the rest of the group went silent. "Holy, this is..." Alex began, paused while everyone waited, and then he continued, "You've got to be kidding me." "What happened?" Bekka asked. "The satellite," Alex gasped. "What happened to it?" Bekka's host questioned, his tone calm but skirting on the edge of panic. "What did happen to it?" Alex questioned. The thing is in pieces? That can't be right." Bekka had the sudden terrifying idea that the mission was instantly a bust, but she waited. Like Alex, they all needed clarification. Meanwhile, Darren kept the bike's speed constant. "What is it you were seeing?" her host asked. Alex began. "I'm seeing multiple signals, all smaller than the satellite." "Can you tell what they are?" her host asked. "Are they moving faster now?" "Speed is," Alex answered, "well, constant. Same speed the satellite was traveling. They're heading in the same direction for the most part, but some of them are veering off." "How many pieces?" her host asked. "Can you tell?" "My system is staying with them," Alex answered. "Tracking three pieces. Plotting new trajectories now." "Oh, hey, gents," Darren spoke up, "noticing something about." Bekka had been using him as a windbreaker again, while she tilted her head back as much as she could to look skyward. Upon his sudden statement, she leveled her gaze, and noticed his helmet was angling slightly upward. Shifting to the left of him, she tried to find the point in which he was looking, and she thought she found what he was talking about. "Are those?" she muttered. "Drones," Darren said. "4 of them by my count." They were flying above the tree line, and far enough ahead they were barely noticeable. Just 4 black dots, but it was the fact that they were matching the bike's speed and in a particular formation that gave them away. "But who, though?" Bekka asked. "Give you one guess," Darren answered. "But," Bekka began, "you really think—" "Your opponent's onto us, Mr. Rosk?" Darren asked. "Alex," Bekka's host replied. "Any signs of the train?" A pause on Alex's end, and then he answered, "I don't see it." When her host was silent, Bekka asked, "What's up, Mr. Rosk?" A sigh went through her head, and then he answered, "I know your hands are full at the moment, Alex, but I have a feeling the train won't announce itself to the station upon its approach." "So they are on to us," Darren said. "Alex," Mr. Rosk began, "have you calculated the new trajectories?" "So it's not destroyed?" Bekka asked. "Our hacker gave me details of the satellite's makeup," Mr. Rosk said. Since it had only so much propellant, he did say an option to alter its descent speed was to break it apart. "Wait, what?" Alex asked. "In short," Mr. Rosk continued, "the satellite's main body can detach from the propulsion system." "Whoa," Bekka breathed. "Is that?" "But he didn't do that, so," Alex offered. "No," Mr. Rosk answered, "or else I would have planned for that and told you all about it." "Which means," Alex began. Mr. Rosk finished his statement. "More than likely, the company who owned the satellite finally broke through the hacker's barrier placed on its system and tried to salvage the situation by implementing the separation option." "Oh, now they finally care about it," Bekka muttered. "Which means it's gonna burn up faster," Alex said. Mr. Rosk sighed again. "It was only a matter of time." "So, wait," Bekka added. "Doesn't that mean they got to the file?" Mr. Rosk began. "I don't know." "Wait," Alex said. "What is it?" Bekka asked. A pause, and then Alex answered, "The train." "It's there?" Mr. Rosk asked. "Oh, it's coming," Alex answered. "But yeah." "What?" Bekka asked. "It's not stopping," Alex chuckled. "They're definitely onto us," Darren said. "No signaling with the horn," Alex said. "Nothing. I don't see any activity from the workers inside the station either." "Not sure it matters now," Darren announced, "but Miss B and I are coming up on the failsafe route in 30 seconds. Alex chuckled again. "And there it goes. Yeah, the train just passed the station. Guess I'll keep my nanomachines to myself then." Darren let off the throttle just enough that Bekka heard the change in the engine's pitch. Since she was still leaning to the left, she thought she spotted the road Darren just mentioned. Her attention was pulled away when Mr. Rosk muttered to himself, "Are they desperate?" "These drones are still watching us," Darren announced. "Uh-oh," Alex said. "Got some activity from the station." "What's happening?" Mr. Rosk asked. "I do believe those are employees jumping in one of the vehicles," Alex answered. "To chase after the train?" Bekka snickered. "Are they armed?" "They can only be headed to the island," Mr. Rosk said. "To warn their buddies, yeah?" Darren asked. Bekka jutted her arm forward at an upward angle, placing her hand just past his helmet. "Look." He looked up to where the drones had been, only to see two of them descending between the trees. Placing her arm back around his upper body, Bekka asked, "Are they?" "Ha!" Darren barked. "Yeah, come right at us." The two drones dipped toward the dirt road and then leveled their altitude. Halting their forward motion, they shot backward. Darren didn't alter the bike's course, though he did pump the throttle. "Come at me now," he cheered, and leaned into the bike. Because Bekka was still wrapped around him, she molded into his new posture. Wanting to close her eyes and look away, she forced herself to watch just over his left shoulder. The drones had positioned themselves side by side. Was Darren aiming for the space between them? From far away, they didn't appear all that big, but distance had a way of... They flashed as dark streaks to either side of the bike. Bekka felt the quick compressions of air against her, heard the two different whines of rotors, and then the roar of the bike engine was all that was left. That and Darren's laughter. "Yeah, that's what I thought!" Bekka twisted her head to the rear. The two drones were spreading away from one another, slowing down, and then curving back around. Settling side by side again, they hurried after the bike. "Wow," she breathed. "They're chasing after us." "Is that right?" Darren laughed, pumping the throttle a little further. The bike jerked, forcing Bekka to face forward or risk a strain on her neck. She didn't have to worry about keeping tabs on the drones anyway. She heard the two distinct buzzing sounds of rotors, and both drones appeared on either side of the bike. Staring wide-eyed at the one on the left, she watched it settle in place, its orientation angled slightly due to its forward momentum. The rotors themselves were invisible. The body was shaped like a flattened teardrop, laying horizontally in the air. 4 thin arms extended from it at specific angles, forming an X pattern. While all of this was sort of run-of-the-mill for drones, boasting high-end quality at the same time, there were 2 things that captured her attention. One was the camera built into the curved top portion of the body. A glass canopy protected the camera while it pointed its lens right at her. The second was the mini-turret mounted on the bottom. For the moment, the barrels were aimed straight ahead, but Bekka thought she counted 4 of them. "Looks like we got ourselves a couple of fans," Darren laughed, glancing to either side of his bike. "And they're right on time, too." Looking ahead again, he added, "We're coming up on the first curve. Think they got what it takes to keep up?" Bekka looked up and ahead, finding the 2 drones still following along above. "The others are still up there." "Crunch time, Alex," Darren called. "Gonna need some new instructions, I reckon." "Alex," Mr. Rosk began, "can you tell the difference in sizes of the 3 pieces with your equipment?" "I think so," Alex answered. "According to the specs," Mr. Rosk continued, "the biggest piece should be the main body. The other 2 are halves of the propulsion apparatus. We need the trajectory of the one." "Right," Alex said. "Give me 20 seconds. "In the meantime," Darren spoke up, "got ourselves a race going on here." "The other 2 aren't there anymore," Bekka said, targeting the space above the trees where the other drones were before. "Think they might be after our mate, Alex?" Darren asked. Bringing the bike out of the curve, the road straightened and he pushed the throttle. The engine roared, and Bekka thought the bike would lurch ahead of the 2 drones flanking them, but there was no change. Both were locked in place, tilting accordingly when coming out of the curve. "All right, it's serious now," Darren said. "Coming up on our first turnoff. What'll it be?" 2 seconds, Alex muttered. Those 2 seconds were filled with the cry of the bike's engine and the whine of the nearby rotors. "Got it," Alex announced. "Yay or nay on this one?" Darren asked. "Total change of plans," Alex answered. "I'm estimating 3 minutes till the main body starts to burn up. Your point of contact is now in between routes 2 and 3. 3 minutes, Darren stated. "Which means," Alex began, but Darren finished for him, "we're running behind." He shoved the throttle to full. When the bike's engine roared this time, the 2 drones drifted backward a few feet. Bekka watched them catch back up and lock into their previous positions, while Darren ducked down near the bike's handlebars. "Don't you worry," he said. "I'll get us there. Just need a little help with the wind to turn off." "Right," Alex said. "As soon as you pass the turnoff for Route 3, count 2 more turns. Take that second one." "The others were pretty open," Bekka remarked. "Where does this one lead to?" "I believe," Mr. Rosk started to say, but Alex answered, "There's an open patch in the forest. Looks like a..." Mr. Rosk came back in. "A private runway." "One of the villages?" Bekka asked. "Actually, no," Mr. Rosk answered. "That runway is owned by one man, and the road we'll take is his private drive." "Some rich dude, huh?" Bekka asked. "Here comes Route 3, Darren announced. By the time Bekka shifted a little to the left along his back to try and spot the road, she caught a flash of the shadowed entrance, and that was that. Her eyes darted toward the drone next to her when it suddenly broke from its position. Raising in altitude and drifting backward, it swept around and settled at the rear of the bike. It's doing something," she announced. She then jerked her head around the other way when she heard the change in the rotors from the other drone. Despite how fast Darren was pushing the bike, it was moving ahead. "What's this?" Darren asked. The drone swept over in front of the bike. Locking into its new position, it dropped lower to glide only a foot or so above the road. "Oi, that's cheating!" Darren laughed. He shifted in his seat and the bike tilted to the left before swerving that way. Racing along that half of the road now, he brought the bike upright again. The two drones eased over to reposition themselves on either end like before. "Wait," Bekka said. "Are they trying to ID the bike?" "Uh-oh," Darren commented. "Whoever's on the other side of those cameras are about to tag you as illegal," Alex warned. "Sorry, officer," Darren said to the drone in front of him. "Didn't think I needed to bring my license on a secret mission, you see." Bekka was looking back at the drone in the rear when she noticed that the angle of the mini-turret had tilted downward. Her eyes went wide. "Oh no you don't," Darren shouted, and Bekka felt him shift against her just before the bike tilted to the right. They swept across the middle of the road at the same time she heard tiny popping sounds nearby. With the right side of her helmet pressing against Darren's back, she saw chunks of dirt jumping up from the road in time with those sounds. "Hang on!" Darren exclaimed, and the tug on Bekka's body switched directions. The back tire locked up and clawed at the road. The drone that was behind them raced forward. Darren tilted the bike to the left, but they didn't shift back over to the center of the road. The back end slid to the right, while the front end stayed in place. "What's happening?" Alex gasped. "They're being shot at," Mr. Rosk responded as the bike was sliding sideways down the road. Darren still had it tilting over on its left side. Letting go of the brake, he punched the throttle. The rear tire dug into the dirt, bouncing the back end of the bike. Once more, Bekka felt the tug on her body switch directions, and the bike was heading for the left side of the road. When it started to sit upright, she couldn't tell much of what was going on, but she did get to see that another road was right in front of them. Just before Darren delivered them to its shadowed maw, one thought went through her head. "This isn't the turn we're supposed to make, is it?" Racing down this narrow corridor, Darren shifted gears and punched the throttle again. Bekka's eyes were already wide, but now she wanted to shrink down as much as she could on the seat. As close as the trees were on either side, and as dark as it was here, she could only see so far ahead. Wasn't Darren going too fast? "Change of plans, Alex," he stated. "We gotta have some cover. The accuracy of those things are spot on. Managed to dodge them that one time, but out in the open like that, don't stand a chance." "Still tracking you," Alex responded. "Turned one early." "Had to," Darren said. "Might have lost them for a moment, but they'll find us again sure enough." Looking back down the uneven road, spotting the shrinking entrance in the distance, Bekka didn't see the two drones at all. Glancing upward, the break in the canopy gave her a thin view of the sky. She wondered if they would come from there. "It's them," Mr. Rosk snapped, grabbing her attention. "It's got to be them." "Who?" she asked. "My uncle's murderers," Mr. Rosk scoffed. "Rerouting you," Alex said. "Was hoping there was another way to our target," Darren laughed. When Bekka spoke to her host, she didn't raise her voice over all the other noises. "Think they believe we have the file?" Before Mr. Rosk responded, she thought she heard him hiss. "They're taking every precaution. Maybe they know about the satellite, but the hacker didn't leave behind any evidence of what he was really doing. Even if they discovered the place he operated from, this is..." He scoffed. "This is just typical of them. They don't know where the file is, so they're panicking. Can't bear to lose their hold on the citizens' ignorance. The people suspect something, but they can't prove anything. It's why the nation is in turmoil." "And it ain't getting much better," Darren added, clicking through the gears and tapping the brakes. Bekka tightened her arms around him, feeling the bike slipping from side to side underneath her. Then it tilted to the right, just before Darren took them through a shallow curve. The workers from the station can't warn those at the port because of the jamming over the whole island, Mr. Rosk continued. They won't know what those criminals on the train are up to until the others arrive, but by then it might not make a difference. They'll use their same excuses and won't face any consequences. Darren righted the bike and sped up down this next stretch of straight road. Can't be too far away from our target route, right, Alex? Might have to run through a village or two to do it, but hey, might make those drones behave, yeah? Don't want innocent blood added to the rest of their crimes. Got witnesses this time. I wouldn't put it past them, Mr. Darren, Mr. Rosk replied. These people don't value life like you and I do. So are the guys on the train controlling these drones? Bekka asked. Can't be from the island since they can't send out a signal. Either that, Mr. Rosk answered, or they're getting aid from an ally. Anybody we should be worried about right now? Alex asked. But hey, Bekka interrupted, can't you hack the drones and get them off us? With everything I'm doing already? Alex responded. Trying to pin them down would take everything I've got with what I'm working with. But the satellite's location is top priority, Mr. Rosk said. Speaking of which, Darren spoke up, I do believe I see a village of sorts, just ahead. What say we take a detour, Alex? Let me look, Alex replied. A familiar buzz drifted into Bekka's helmet, among the roar of the bike and Darren's harsh breathing. She twisted her head from side to side, trying to pinpoint its location, and then looked up. Gasping, she announced, They're right above us. Crazy timing, Darren replied, tilting the bike to the right. Bekka held on tight, glad she happened to be facing that side, because she saw the trees give way to sudden man-made structures. While she was trying to piece them together and figure out what kind of buildings they were, Darren was taking the bike closer to them. Clicking through the gears, the engine revved up while the bike pulled back from its speed. Bekka was pressed harder into Darren's back as she heard the rear tire digging at the dirt road in quick succession. She couldn't look skyward anymore, but noticed the sound of the buzzing rotors was receding. Running ahead or falling behind, she wondered. Gotta take it, Alex, Darren stated, cutting from the road and onto a narrow, foot-beaten path. Bekka couldn't ignore the sudden glimpses of faces from adults and children of all ages. She could only guess, but everyone in this village was frozen in place, their attention fixed upon the racing motorcycle, disrupting everything. Pardon me, Darren called out while pivoting the handlebars back and forth. The bike wiggled its way along and disappeared behind one of the buildings facing the road they just left. Feathers went flying, and Bekka heard the squawking of chickens, so she listened for the splintering sounds of wood cages exploding, but all she managed to catch was the bleating of goats and a child laughing from some random direction. Darren was forced to slow the bike down enough to where he had to kick his feet out and push away from the uneven path several times. The bike bobbed its way through a shady patch of clay and grass, and when he was able to gain a little speed, it was just in time to dash alongside a barn or shack of some sort. Bekka couldn't tell, and despite the rise and fall of the engine's tantrum, the buzz from the nearby rotors was unmistakable. It wasn't easy, but she fought for the chance to twist her head around and look behind them. In the midst of the blurred and bouncing village setting, she couldn't help but fixate on the one thing that didn't fit. One of the drones was dropping from the canopy above to attempt and level itself with their bike. A single popping sound escaped it, and Bekka actually heard the zing of the bullet whiz by too close. Somewhere up ahead, it struck the trunk of a tree. Darren caught the majority of the spray of wood and splinters, while Bekka witnessed a cloud of the tiny particles rush by on her left. Then Darren pushed the throttle, and the engine rose in pitch. The back tire caught the uneven ground, and Bekka felt the tug trying to pull her from the bike again. "Can you believe it?" Darren laughed, holding the bike straight. "Found a back alley out in the sticks." Bekka managed to peer over his left shoulder then. Noticing a row of shacks passing along their right, she shifted to that side. Able to take in some of the details of each one, by the looks of things, she and Darren happened to be running behind them. There were old piecemeal doors fixed within slipshod thresholds, all of which were at the tops of steps made up of whatever objects the owners could get their hands on, because the shacks were sitting above the ground, probably supported by bricks. She didn't have time to look because they were already leaving the row of buildings behind. Yet, Bekka couldn't let this chance pass. Just as Darren took the bike onto a path that angled to the left, she stated, "Just like the off-road race in Pell Palm." The bike twisted in midair, landing with both tires angled with the path's shape. The front end anchored in place, while the back slid out to the right. Darren didn't give it time to secure enough traction, pumping the throttle several times before throwing it all the way open. The front tire threatened to lift from the dirt as the bike lurched forward, but the back tire found enough grip to keep the bike grounded. "Oh my," Darren responded. "Familiar with that one, are ya?" The trees within arm's length sparsely bordered either side of them, offering a short stretch to what looked like an opening a few seconds ahead. Bekka ignored the buzz of rotors nearby and replied to Darren's question. "The Sandy Break Rally, 3 years ago, right? You came in first place." Entering the clearing, they spotted the deep trench along their right. Darren took the bike alongside it. Because there was more room, he dared to speed up, but the ground was uneven. They hit several bumps that took them slightly airborne. Despite the terrain, Darren responded, "What a pleasant surprise! A dyed-in-the-wool fan of the races way out here." The cat was out of the bag, so Bekka didn't let up. "And you donated the cash prize to the people of that town. I remember. You took a picture with all the kids." Darren made a quick glance to the right. Looking ahead again, he then jerked the bike to the right. Closing in on the edge of the trench, he pushed the throttle just before hitting a bump. The bike's engine whined when it went airborne, totally clearing the width of the trench. Bekka caught a quick shot of the space below. There was water down there. A stream? Her thoughts shattered when the bike landed on the other side, and Darren tilted the bike to the right, taking it away from the trench altogether. The trees in front of them were just as sparse as those before, so they could see the road several yards away. Darren went for it, taking them down a steep hill. When the bike leveled out, it bounced from the impact. They exploded from the trees, and Darren kicked his right foot out, letting it slide along the ground to keep the bike from falling over. At the same time, he pumped the throttle, waiting for the back tire to get a good grip. When it did, he opened the throttle up and let the bike gain some speed. The dirt road had come from the north and was curving to the southeast. If they were fortunate, it would take them behind the village they just visited, back toward the rich man's private runway. "Well, I'll be," Darren finally said. "Got us a spectator on the team. Methinks a proper introduction is in order after this, whether it's a bust or no." "I'll hold you to it," Bekka laughed, delighted. "A minute and 19 seconds, Alex announced, "till the main body starts to burn up. The other two pieces already are." "Can we see them?" Bekka asked, trying to look up. When she could, though, the canopy blocked out most of the sky. "How much time till it passes over the new contact point?" Mr. Rosk asked. There was a little too long of a pause from Alex's connection. Bekka noticed this, having to disregard her surroundings for the moment. Darren was navigating the bike down what she could no longer consider as a road, but a trail winding its way through this patch of forest. "Alex?" she questioned. You still with us?" Another moment passed with Alex silent on the other end. Her host spoke up. "The timing has to be less than a Bekka," Alex said, his voice slightly subdued. "You can keep a timer in your display, right?" "Yeah," she answered, "but—" "Start it at 45 seconds, Alex continued. "Be there when it reaches 0. "Wait," Bekka gasped. "What?" "Gotta go silent," Alex said. "What happened?" she gasped. "The timer," her host insisted. Scoffing, she flexed the right muscles, bringing up a timer in the middle of her vision. It read 0, but she switched the numbers to read 43 seconds to compensate for her hesitation. As she did this, however, she noticed Alex's end of the connection hadn't disconnected entirely. Maybe he just muted it, but... She scoffed again, focusing on the numbers now counting down in her vision. 41 seconds till it passes, Mr. Rosk said, directing the information to Darren. "I wish I could get a clear shot ahead," Darren responded. "Running blind here." The trail had made a long curve back to the right. Bekka figured if she had her bearings correct, they were heading back toward the road that brought them to the village. She hadn't noticed any offshoots from it before, but then again, they had been traveling too fast and were more worried about getting away from the drones. Darren was punching the throttle as far as he dared, taking the curve so fast that the bike skirted near the trees along the left side. There was no fighting that. He had tilted the bike slightly, but the rear tire slipped several times, threatening to move them into the oncoming branches. Then the tug on Bekka's body changed directions. Darren brought the bike upright, only to tilt it to the left. The trail was curving back the other way, only not as sharp or as long. A solid wall of metal was coming right at them. Bekka didn't have time to gasp, neither did Darren. There was a click from the bike, and then he flinched against Bekka. The bike twisted to the left, the rear end swinging out to the right. Darren brought it over on its left side, and dark gray metal took over everything. Gravel and chunks of grass and dirt whirled and danced all around Bekka. The world was sideways and rising upward, showing her bits of details of things she didn't know how to piece together. All of it was shadowed by something large and presumably flat. Though it passed above her, she was torn between the sounds of the bike's tires growling against the earth and the fact that she could make out rows of rivets in all that gray metal. And wait, there was another tire, but it didn't belong to the bike. No, it was attached to a rod of some sort. She saw its surface catching the sudden arrival of light. The rod, or whatever, was it standing at an angle? She had a hard time figuring that out since everything was sideways, but now all of it was leaving since she was actually sliding right into that light. The bike's engine revved several times, and Darren grunted in her ears. The bike whipped the world back into place, and gravity pulled from below like it always had. The bike was upright again. Darren's left leg was angled out. His foot was bouncing along the ground. Each time it did, the bike had wobbled that way. He pumped the throttle some more, and the back tire dug into the dirt before securing a grip. Then he pressed into the throttle, and the bike raced forward. "Hi," Darren laughed. "Who parked that there?" Still trying to believe she was still alive, Bekka noticed he was looking off to the left. Then he looked in the opposite direction before leaning that way. The bike tilted to the right, and he turned them in that direction. Bekka didn't know if her head was slung around to allow her to look to the left, but somehow she was gazing toward the rear of the bike. As it left the area, its tires just carved up. She was aware of a wall of trees falling away. Centered in what looked to be a corner of this open space was the remains of something large and metal. Parts of it were tucked behind some of the trees, but she could see enough to finally figure out what she and Darren nearly collided into. A derelict airplane. It was sitting with its right side facing out from the forest line. Its wing was missing on that side, but that wasn't what captured her interest. The aircraft was sitting at an angle. The front end sat higher than the rear. Since it was supported by its landing gear, there was space underneath it. The ground there had been newly excavated by the bike's tires. "How about that?" Darren cheered. "We're in luck." Bekka whipped back around and took in the vast open space they were racing through. "I do believe this is that private runway Alex was talking about," Darren said. Coming from what Bekka assumed was the back right corner of this open field, Darren angled the bike for the long stretch of asphalt in the center. The expanse of grass and dirt kicked up by the tires was replaced by the squall of rubber against pavement. The jarring from the uneven ground settled into an erratic vibration. Having felt the sudden jolt from the earth to runway, it was no surprise to see that not only were the edges of the asphalt rugged and jagged, but the runway itself was a patchwork of cracks and shallow potholes. Darren brought the bike to the very center where there wasn't so much wear and tear. "This is the finish line," he cheered, finally able to keep the bike moving in a steady straight line. "But I gotta ask, is this the right speed? Don't want to miss our mark." The way was clear. No other vehicles sat nearby. Satisfied, Bekka looked skyward. Alex mentioned prior to the mission that the satellite would start to burn up at over 40 miles up. With an hour still left before the sun sat upon the horizon, there was still too much light to be able to see the two smaller pieces burning up, it seemed. "We're fortunate that the margin of error is rather wide," Mr. Rosk answered. "With the signal operating on limited power, its natural radius is narrow, but I'd say the bulk of the runway's central region is our target." "That sounds a little too easy if you ask me," Darren laughed. He was already starting to back off on the bike's speed. "Did we already win?" "Miss Summers, let me know the moment you hear the transfer's confirmation," Mr. Rosk said. Still looking skyward, Bekka responded, 21 seconds. Dwelling on what Alex told her earlier, she thought back on the moment he had to go silent. It was possible he was still listening to what was happening on their end, but she wished she could get some sort of update on what was happening on his. Then she remembered the other two drones that flew off in another direction. The only place that made sense was the train station. Her fears were suddenly redirected by a loud snap just behind her, like something struck the... She gasped, whipping her head around just in time to see a chunk of the runway sailing free. It fell back onto the asphalt and tumbled in the bike's wake. She only had to lift her eyes a little further to spot the black dot just above the receding tree line. It was descending, quickly aligning itself with the bike. "There's a drone behind us," she exclaimed. Darren flashed his head to the left and then back forward. "Bad timing." Pressing the throttle, he urged the bike back up to speed and then leaned right. The bike drifted that way, and the suspension fought with the battered runway surface. Another chunk broke loose at their left. Bekka spotted it. Darren righted the bike, let it run that side of the runway for 2 seconds, and then took it over to the center. Glancing back, Bekka found the drone, saw it swaying according to the bike's movements. "What gives?" Darren laughed. "They're the type to shoot first and ask questions later." "Do what you can," Mr. Rosk said. "It's almost time." Still watching the drone, Bekka brought her focus back to her display. 13 seconds. "Where's the other one?" her host asked. She blinked, focused on the drone again, and thought to search above. Darren was taking the bike along the left side of the runway. He darted it back to the middle, but before they arrived, a chunk of the asphalt flew free right beside the back tire. Bekka flinched, heard the clank against the spinning rim, and saw the spray of rubble before it swept away in the distance. They won't stop us, Mr. Rosk snapped. They won't, not like this. The tires, Bekka thought. They're trying to shoot the tires. A second source of that buzzing sound drew her away from the drone behind them. Twisting back around, she followed the noise and looked to her immediate right. The other drone was there, racing several feet above the ground, just outside of the runway's edge. The tires, she shouted. Darren glanced to the left, then to the right, and spotted the drone. They're trying to... Bekka tried to shout, but her words were shoved back down her throat when Darren clicked to a lower gear and punched the throttle. The bike lurched forward just as a chunk of the runway exploded behind the front tire. The debris pelted the underside of the bike. Bekka felt some of it striking her shins. "Hey now," Darren snapped. "That's downright sleazy." The bike's engine was screaming, so he clicked back into the highest gear just as he took the bike to the left side of the runway. A piece of asphalt flew free along Bekka's right, a shot taken from the drone still behind them. That was followed by several shots across the runway, chasing the bike's front tire to the left side. Darren jerked to the right, bringing the bike into a quick lunge that way. The next shot struck the front fender. The end of it spun free, crashed against the slanted frame, and darted out to the left. Darren brought the bike upright and then shot back to the left, shouting, "Can't slow me down!" 6 seconds left. "Don't let them," Mr. Rosk snapped. "Don't let them get away with this. Those power-hungry murderers." 5 seconds, Bekka called. Another shot pinged the front of the bike's body, but Darren didn't flinch. The second zipped right over what was left of the front fender. 4, Bekka called. "Every part of their souls are corrupt," Mr. Rosk scoffed. Darren swept the bike back to the right, hearing several shots crossing just above the front of the body. One struck the wheel with a loud squeak of metal. Something flew free, but he held the handlebars steady. "Determined," he gasped. 3, Bekka called, hearing a part of the bike being struck behind her, followed by something clanking along the runway. "Hounding us every step of the way," Rosk snapped. Darren swerved the bike back to the left. "Even now," Mr. Rosk scoffed. 2, Bekka called. "And all for what?" Mr. Rosk growled. Another shot hit the front wheel, sending sparks and shrapnel flying along the right side of the bike. Again, Bekka ignored the collisions along her shin and the sound of something else being torn from the rear end. Swerving back to the right, Darren hissed when the potholes threatened to pull the handlebars from his grips, yet he didn't let up on the throttle. "Well within the margin of error, you said?" he grunted. 1, Bekka called. "Just to be able to order others around," Mr. Rosk was shouting. "You'll kill just to be able to..." "Gah!" Darren gasped when a shot ricocheted off the curve of the right handlebar, sending a bright flash before his face. 0, Bekka called, and her mind shot skyward. Up there, diving through the Earth's atmosphere at a speed of over 17,000 miles per hour, was an expensive but neglected piece of equipment. Hidden on its hard drive was a single audio recording, which it was beaming straight down at a rate of 300 kilometers per second. Bekka imagined the shadow of that satellite racing along the ground, how big it should have been. Like a single cloud passing in front of the sun, an entire region would fall under shade. But because of how important this satellite was, there was a narrow line carving across the earth. Yet, even still, with the amount of people tied to its trajectory, just being near the degrading scope of its simplified aim, surely that was enough to make a connection so commonplace in humanity's daily occurrences. At that moment, all the confirmation Bekka got of her musings was a simple little beep in her ears. "Oi!" Darren snapped. "That was a little too close." His outburst brought Bekka back to the present. Was that her host was asking her, and she knew exactly what he was alluding to. A smile stretched across her face. "We got it! I heard the notification!" "Right!" Darren shouted and slammed on the brakes. Her host was asking something then, but she had put everything into clinging tight to Darren as the back tire squalled down the runway. The bike wobbled side to side, and along with those motions was the tug on her body, trying to push Darren over the handlebars. The roar of the engine was erased by that rubber-eating cry. The bike's rear end began drifting to the left. Darren pivoted the handlebars to maintain their direction. The tug swept around, eventually trying to pull Bekka from the side of the bike. When it started to tilt that way, she thought she was about to be thrown off. Then the squalling ceased as quick as it started. The bike jolted to a halt. Bekka opened her eyes just in time to see the light blue smoke that had been chasing them down the runway finally catch up and rush ahead. In place of the squall was the sound of the idling engine. The bike sat facing the edge at an angle. Darren was propping it up with his left foot placed firmly upon the asphalt. There was another sound, high-pitched. Might have been her ears ringing. Darren's chuckling came through then. "She got a few dings," he was saying, leaning to the side to examine the front wheel. Bringing his focus down to the middle of the bike, he finished with, "But she's still purring." Purring, Bekka thought. She was hearing something else. It didn't take her long to figure out what it was and where it was coming from. "Good," she responded and pointed up the runway. "Because they're coming back around." Darren glanced back at her, saw where she was pointing, and looked that way. The two drones had already halted their forward advance. Now they were ascending, spreading away from each other, and coming back together. Going into a descent, they hurried back toward the bike. "How much ammo do those things carry?" Darren asked. "You'd be surprised," Bekka answered. Darren pumped the throttle a few times. "Well, we got what we came for, yeah?" "We have to get to the train station," Mr. Rosk instructed. "There, I can unlock it." Darren laughed. "Don't think they'll make it easy for us." He let go of the brake and pumped the throttle again. The back tire spun and barked at the asphalt until the bike lunged forward. Darren brought his foot inward and turned the bike to face down the runway. The two drones hadn't altered their course, leaving only so much space between them as they closed in. "Here we are again," Darren laughed, leaning forward and punching the throttle further. Bekka couldn't look ahead over his shoulder. She just pressed the side of her helmet against his back and listened to the pitch in the engine rising. "Ain't gonna be like last time, is it?" Darren laughed, and Bekka squeezed him harder. Another voice came through then. "Just leave it to me." Bekka's eyes popped open, recognizing it. Darren's back flexed against her, and the rear tire squalled along the pavement again. "Whoa there!" he called. Because her eyes were open now, she saw what she could only assume was one of the drones zip by, but in several pieces since it was tumbling along the runway. Darren jerked the bike to the left, letting the rear end slide out to the right. The other drone went bouncing by, shattering into multiple pieces and spreading out along the asphalt. Now that the bike was stopped once more, Darren and Bekka were staring down the stretch they just traversed. Both drones were laying in piles of mangled parts with lines of loose bits trailing after them. "Well now," Darren said, "that went a little better than I expected." "Alex?" Bekka asked. "What did you do?" "So I did get both of them, huh?" he asked. "By my count," Darren chuckled. "So, wait," Bekka gasped. "You hacked into them? I thought—" "Turns out when I put some of the workload onto you guys," Alex explained, "I had room enough to track their network." "And made them self-destruct?" Bekka laughed. "Nah," Alex offered. "Took the quick route and just shut them off." "You saved our bacon, mate," Darren cheered. "I'm glad I know you." "But wait," Bekka said. There were 4. Yeah, Alex replied. Had the misfortune of being introduced to the other 2. I knew they would go there, Bekka said. So, did you find out the source of their network? Mr. Rosk asked. I only know the location right now, Alex answered. Put more effort into gaining control before discovering their identity. As soon as the last drone went down, I lost the signal altogether. You still have the location? Mr. Rosk asked. Yeah, Alex answered. I'm guessing you want me to hold on to that. Yes, I do, Mr. Rosk answered. But you wouldn't happen to be aware of any other activity in the area, would you? Not in the air, Alex answered. On the ground, though. Got some of your guys looking at me funny. Guess this is the part where you get to do some name dropping, yeah? Darren offered. Looks like I'm gonna have to, Alex answered, since they're gonna want to know what just happened outside of the station. All right, Mr. Rosk said. We'll give you this time to bring them up to speed. In the meantime, Miss Summers, may I take over? We seem to have earned us a moment of rest. Oh, Bekka replied, and leaned back on the seat. Yeah, let me get the tablet. While she unzipped a section along the front of her suit, Darren shut the bike off, moved the kickstand out with his foot, and let the bike's weight lean upon it. Guess this is a good time to check up on this sweetheart here, he said, slipping from the seat and kneeling down next to the front wheel. Looky there, he gasped, touching his gloved fingertips to a bent piece of the rim. Still seated, Bekka had already zipped up her suit and was waking the tablet's screen. There was no need to select any icons or menus. The only important software that was installed was open long before Bekka tucked the tablet away. Once the screen was activated, she was looking at a smaller window that was pulled up in front of everything else. On it was a single line. She gasped, balling up her right fist. Then she pumped it up and down. Yes, 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 it actually caught it. That one line was made up of a bunch of random numbers, but it read as an audio file. Latched onto it at the bottom left corner was a little padlock icon. That's pretty unreal, I gotta say, Darren said, straightening up from the pavement to stand. I got my side of the briefing, but still, that margin of error you mentioned had to have been bigger than I thought. May I? Mr. Rosk asked, and Bekka paused. Oh, yes, go ahead. Her shoulders then relaxed, and she sighed. Her right hand, which was a fist before, and was now holding on to the tablet again, moved her index finger over to the screen. She touched the file name, and a smaller window popped up. A password was needed. She tapped the empty line next to the word, and a digital keyboard rose up from the bottom of the screen. Holding the tablet in both hands, Mr. Rosk took Bekka's thumbs across the keyboard, tapping letters with such speed that, even though she was able to keep up with her own eyes, she only caught a few that her host picked out. Not enough to discover what the word or phrase was. When she pressed enter, both the keyboard and the password window went away. We had to do it this way, Bekka said, but with Mr. Rosk's refinement. Our adversaries were determined to keep what happened a secret until something like an election began, one they would control. The quick animation for the file being selected played out, and a larger window opened, almost taking over the whole screen. Media player controls appeared at the bottom, along with the feed's time bar. Once the file loaded, a man appeared. He was seated at what looked to be an office desk. There were shelves with books and other paraphernalia behind him. Much of the background was cut off, however, because the man was the focus. Oh, Bekka's voice broke, and she felt tears stinging the corners of her eyes. But she was smiling. Uncle Myrick. For a second, she stared at the man's gentle face, though, in the short time her host took, she happened to notice a slight sadness there. She brought her finger down and pressed the play button. The small speakers were turned up as loud as they could go, and it was fortunate Darren had cut the bike's engine off. Better still was the desolate environment they were in. All the previous excitement hadn't brought out the rich man who owned this private airport. Not yet, anyway. "Greetings, people of Luthania," Mr. Rosk's uncle began. "I will skip the formalities for the sake of time. The coming debate over who should be the next prime delegate of your great island nation has already sparked much turmoil. Therefore, if indeed my counsel is still favored by a great majority of you, I will now speak the name of who I have nominated." Bekka pressed the controls, pausing the video. "Heh," Darren chuckled. "I suppose that's highly sensitive material you got there." Bekka looked up at him, then back down at the face on the video player. "Yes," she said, and then expelled a relieved sigh. "Yes, it is." Pressing the screen again, she minimized the player window and all the rest of the windows until the generic wallpaper was all that was displayed. "Okay, Miss Summers. I give you back control. Please keep this safe until we arrive." Her slouched posture straightened, and she took a second to blink away the tears that threatened to spill over her bottom eyelids. "Gotcha," she said, unzipping that front section again and slipping the tablet back inside her suit. "Well," Darren began, "where to, Mr. Rosk? The train station still?" "Actually," Bekka's host answered, "now that everything has settled down for now, we should go straight to the island's main entrance." "Right then," Darren cheered and hopped back on the bike. "Alex," Bekka said, "you good on your end?" "In a manner of speaking," Alex answered. "Looks like your uncle's name carries a lot of weight over here, Mr. Rosk." Darren jump-started the bike. The engine coming back to life didn't drown out Mr. Rosk's response. "Are more of them heading to the island?" "Some of them are," Alex answered. Darren pumped the throttle, let go of the brakes, and the bike lurched into motion. Straightening their posture, he took them down the rest of the runway. "You're coming with them too, huh?" Bekka asked. "Well," Alex responded, "I would, but let's just say I didn't get to hack into the network before one of the drones decided to shoot up my van's engine." "What?" Bekka gasped. "You're kidding me." "Then they had the nerve to shoot out all 4 tires for good measure," Alex continued. "How about that?" "You can't hitch a ride with one of the station employees?" Bekka asked. "I do believe they're in too big of a hurry to wait on me," Alex answered. "Besides, my equipment is still working. Made sure to take out that trigger-happy one before it decided to riddle the side of my van with holes while the other one watched. Now, for a little revenge, I might work to get some more info on the source of that network." "Please do," Mr. Rosk said. "No doubt it will help our cause." Bekka snickered. "A way to speed up your own revenge, I'm guessing." "I right believe I understand how you feel, Mr. Rosk," Darren said. "Just met 'em today and I don't like 'em much one bit." "You are not alone, Mr. Darren," Mr. Rosk replied. "Believe me." They were passing up the small tarmac at a distance from the runway when Darren began. "It's just one thing I'm not quite clear on. The man's son I could understand putting together a mission like this, but his nephew? Bet there's some intrigue behind it." They left the edge of the runway and churned their way across the dusty expanse. Ahead were 2 openings in the trees. One was straight ahead, while the other was more toward the right side of the field. Connecting them both, and skirting along the edge of the tree line, was a dirt road. Spotting it, Bekka knew that was a segment of the rich man's driveway. His house was hidden somewhere beyond the tarmac they left behind. "My uncle's family is in mourning right now," Mr. Rosk explained. "And of course, they want justice. And yes, his son has already spoken of plans, but he and I both knew our enemies would expect a reaction, so he is forced to stay his hand at the moment. Me, however, no one but a select few know I took it upon myself to put this together. Darren took them onto the drive and into the forest opening that would take them back out under the bridge that brought them here. And your enemies were so afraid of your uncle's influence, Bekka stated. Of course, Mr. Rosk expelled a sad laugh. The true citizens of Luthania love my uncle. I'm sure in their hearts they want him to lead them, but he wouldn't dare. Why not? Bekka asked. The politics? Not that, Mr. Rosk answered. It's simply because he isn't Luthanian, but his dealings with them over the years has made him part of their family. So, Darren said, what you're saying is there's one less good man left in the world? It took a moment for Mr. Rosk to answer, but when he did, he simply said, Indeed. When they could see the entrance to the bridge that would take them from the mainland to the island, Darren remarked, Looks like you were right about the whole name-dropping thing. These guys are no joke. Long before he brought the bike to a slow, meandering stop, Bekka wondered at what point the group of soldiers would start pointing their guns and shouting for Darren to turn around. Not to freak any of them out, and since he had a lot of fun already, he cut the bike's speed to an easy 40 miles per hour, giving their approach a gentle facade. It's okay, Mr. Rosk reassured them. Once you give them the name I told you, they'll understand. Good thing they're some of the good guys, Bekka snickered. There were several military vehicles gathered along either side of the bridge's entrance. All of them were angled toward the middle of it, poised to block any suspicious vehicle that might try to bypass the men standing along the dirt road just ahead of them. Several of those men broke from their positions to surround the bike. One of the closest guys was giving Darren the signal to cut the engine. He complied, once bringing the bike to a stop. I'm sorry, the one soldier began, but the nation of Luthania is closed for the time being. Official business only. Darren reached up and touched the corners of his visor, prompting it to lift. Once that portion around his eyes was revealed, he gave them a big smile. Well, gents, it seems I'm in luck then. Happen to be trying to contact a guy by the name of Klosiv. Ever heard of him? A couple of the soldiers exchanged glances, including the one who had spoken to Darren. Go ahead and tell them I sent you, Bekka's host said. A good fellow named Rosk Farron sent us, by the way, Darren added. One of the soldiers gasped. The looks Darren and Bekka received then were those of slack jaws and wide eyes. The soldier next to them turned his head into the radio attached to his left shoulder. Taking his hand from his gun, he reached up and pressed a button on its side. Before he started talking to whoever was on the other end, he turned around and lowered his voice. While he spoke, Bekka caught several of the other surrounding soldiers leaning toward one another and whispering. One of them on the right actually addressed them. How do you know the Farron family? The question silenced all the whispers, and the man who had been conversing through his radio. Darren looked back at Bekka. She read the gesture to mean it was her call, how they would respond. Finding that soldier who questioned her again, she was aware of all the stares from the others. We don't, she answered. It was Rosk Farron who hired us. Would that satisfy them? Probably not, but she didn't want to say anything more, especially that she was carrying an all-important file. That soldier next to the bike caught a response from his radio. With his back still turned, he muttered a reply and then waited. The seconds between then and the response back was choked with complete silence. Bekka took this time to glance about the group of soldiers. Some of their slack-jawed expressions had softened, while others looked like they had a question they wanted to ask. But maybe because of the silence, they kept it to themselves. When another response came through the radio, the soldier muttered his reply, But this time, he increased the volume of his voice. Not that of agitation, but Bekka felt it might have been a bit of disbelief. Name-dropping had its effects, she figured. After another awkward few seconds of silence, waiting for a reply, the soldier's radio warbled something incoherent. When he muttered his response back, one of the other soldiers near him stepped close and added his own comment. Not to the radio, but to that man, who paused to consider what was said, and then nodded. Before the radio could respond, he spoke into it, made eye contact with the soldier in front of him, and then both men turned to regard their visitors. Stepping back up to the bike, the one soldier got a response from his radio. He reached up, clicked the button, gave a quick confirmation, and said to Darren, "We will grant you access, but some of our men will escort you. Follow their instructions, and they will take you where you need to go." Darren smiled. "Much obliged, mate," and he reached up to activate his visor, bringing it back down over his eyes. Many of the soldiers surrounding them backed away, while the man with the radio and the guy who spoke to him earlier headed toward the bridge. They signaled one of the drivers just as Darren jump-started the bike. Its engine rumbled while he kept the bike in place, waiting for his cue. Eventually, one of the military trucks pulled out from its position along the side of the bridge and turned to face the island. There it stopped and waited. Those two soldiers came back to Darren and Bekka to instruct them. "Stay behind that truck at all times. Another one will be behind you. Is that understood?" Darren nodded. "Yes, sir." "All right," the one soldier with the radio said, and waved them on by. "Go on ahead." "Thank you, sir," Darren cheered, and eased the bike forward, arriving on the bridge. Before he caught up to the truck waiting ahead, it began moving, so he matched its pace. Bekka glanced back to find the second truck already in place behind them. "Hey, check it out!" Darren grabbed her attention. When she faced forward, he was nodding to some point off to the right. "There's the train track," he said. Another bridge was curving away from the mainland and cutting across the water several miles out. It eventually disappeared along the eastern side of the island. "They've already arrived," Mr. Rosk commented, "no doubt being protected and brought somewhere safe." Bekka considered that, and then responded, "I wonder how long that'll last for them." Evil men are always looking over their shoulder," Darren said. "It's their curse." "Now that you're about to enter the island," Mr. Rosk began, "you'll fall under the effects of the jammers they've put in place, which means this might be farewell to you both." "Oh yeah," Bekka replied. "Too bad you couldn't be with us till the end of the mission." "Yes," Mr. Rosk said, "and it will be some time until I will be able to speak with Mr. Klossev, though that will be after my uncle's counsel will have been heard and spread across the whole island." "I imagine it mightn't be the same for you like it is for his son," Darren said. "Gotta stay in hiding until all this blows over." "Oh," Mr. Rosk responded, "we won't stay in hiding for long. We intend to lead the charge in confronting the devils who brought about this madness, believe me." "Ha! That's the spirit!" Darren laughed. "Evil men might plot their schemes," Mr. Rosk said, "but they can be blindsided by the machinations of those opposed to them." "Don't suppose they might be planning something?" Darren asked, "seeing as they're desperate and all." "Desperate men can be unpredictable," Mr. Rosk replied, "but they are also clueless. I imagine they might try to behave themselves until they can acquire some intel. Little do they know they have no actions to take. Miss Summers, I thank you and your organization. You have played an integral part in stopping a civil war before it even began." What could Bekka say to that? She didn't know. Despite wanting to respond, she couldn't. Instead, she looked skyward. trying to guess where the satellite might be, if it hadn't already burnt up. She wondered if there was still time to make a wish. Right as they exited the bridge, the truck ahead of them slowed and turned off to the left. Darren followed it into another lane that brought them to the entrance to a parking lot. The building at the back of it was guarded by more military vehicles and armed soldiers. The leading escort truck stopped after turning into the parking lot. The driver exchanged a few words with the guards posted there, and then continued forward. Darren and Bekka followed it all the way to the front of the building. Just as they arrived, the front vehicle turned off to the left and stopped. When Darren brought the bike to a stop, he and Bekka happened to be aligned with the beginning of a sidewalk that would bring them to the building's front door. The soldiers waiting along the curb stepped out and surrounded the bike. Darren was already activating the visor to lift on his helmet. "We have arranged a room for you to wait for your contact," one soldier spoke. "We must ask that you remove your helmets and any weapons you might be carrying." "Righto," Darren said, and started pulling his helmet off. Bekka was about to remove hers, but then she paused when finally seeing the back of Darren's head. That sweaty, curly, dark hair. It was like that after every race. He would have to sweep his gloved hands through it to keep the sweat from dripping in his eyes when being interviewed. There were no journalists now, but he did bring his left hand up to make one long pass through his hair. Then he looked back at her and beamed. She was smiling as she slowly removed her helmet. "How about that, huh?" he asked. "Looks like we're getting the royal treatment." "Yeah," she laughed, wiping the sweat from her own hair, mimicking his signature move. His gaze lingered on her until one of the soldiers addressed him. "Any weapons on your person?" Turning to that soldier, he lifted both hands in surrender and responded, "The bike here is my only weapon. Served me well, she did." He glanced back at Bekka and winked at her. She was still smiling ear to ear. "Come with us, please," the soldier said. Bekka and Darren dismounted the bike and followed the soldiers, who formed a close perimeter around them as they walked down the sidewalk. Bekka noticed they were scanning the surrounding area the whole way to the front door. She had related the appearance of the military to their affiliation with Mr. Rosk. Being here at the edge of the island, she couldn't see any riots or protests that might be happening deeper within the city proper. Still, maybe it was just protocol, but perhaps even the silence she heard was a fragile piece. Since she was shorter than the soldiers, she couldn't see much past them. Whether there were other military personnel or civilians nearby, which of them could have been a spy for the opposition? She had been shot at already during this mission, but she had been traveling fast enough to have an advantage. What about now? It was only after she and Darren were inside the building and the doors closed behind them that she breathed a sigh of relief. Turning down several halls and ending up in what felt like the back of the building, she and Darren were shown to a small room. A soldier informed them that there would be a guard right outside, and then closed the door. The silence of the little meeting room was heavy. After everything, being sequestered away like this was a complete shock to Bekka's senses. She confirmed that her ears were ringing. She remembered the plugs she was still wearing then, and considered Alex's situation. Darren turned to her and extended his right hand. "Well, now that we have this chance, the name's Darren Collin." She matched his grin and accepted his hand. It was a gloved handshake. "Bekka Summers. Nice to meet you in person, Derringer the trick shot." "Ah," Darren laughed and turned to sit upon the edge of the table running the length of the room. He crossed his arms and said, "Just so you know, I was privy to it the whole time. Alex wanted me to keep it a secret as long as I could. He was sure you'd figure it out, though." That's just like him, Bekka thought. "So," Darren continued, "how long you been into the races?" Bekka was blushing. She couldn't believe she was blushing now, of all times. She had been literally wrapped around him for a good portion of the mission. Well, ever since I was little. Oh? Darren asked. Your dad a fan? That how it started? Actually, she replied, he was a racer back then. Not professional or anything, just a few regional races. Yeah? You ever get into it? Darren asked. She shook her head, casting her eyes to the floor. She wouldn't stop grinning like a loser. No, I rode with my dad a few times, but my interests were elsewhere. Oh yeah? Darren asked. Where's that? Lifting her head a little, she answered, I actually got into practicing parkour professionally. He arched an eyebrow. She bunched her shoulders up around her neck. So let me get this straight, he began with a growing smile. You can jump from the top of a building and land in style, but going fast on a bike makes you tense up. Her cheeks reddened further. Well, she snickered. Don't think I didn't notice, Darren continued. Could hardly breathe half the time. She ducked her head down, hating that she was giggling and trying to hide her face. Ha! He laughed, and then wiggled his fingers before his eyes. Thought I may have seen spots. She had to look away from him then, turning to sit on the edge of the table like he was. Lowering her head, her hair dropped to cover her face, but she was still giggling. Watching her, Darren asked, Watching the races remind you of your dad? Lifting her head some, she sighed and nodded. Yeah, I guess it might. Something he did that I didn't want to try and copy. That was his thing, I had mine. But I still enjoyed watching him. It was such a regular thing that I fell into watching other races. She regarded him, became a regular fan. Darren was nodding. Ah, and? He shrugged. Might even keep up with the careers of specific races, right? She looked away to let her hair hide her face again. Her stupid smile wouldn't go away. She nodded in response to his question. A few, yeah. What are the odds, yeah? He asked. The world can be a small place. Looking ahead, he sighed. Though I suppose your career takes you all over. He regarded her. No telling who you'll meet. She nodded again, lifting her head a little once she felt some of the heat leave her cheeks. Or what kind of hijinks you might get into, he added. She lifted her eyebrows as she nodded slowly this time. Speaking of which, he continued, you get to make a wish. She lifted her head and regarded him. I didn't see it, but... Made a wish anyway, he said. She nodded. Well, he said, I won't ask what you wished for. Wouldn't come true then, right? Ain't that the rule? She tilted her head back and rolled her eyes. I think so. He considered her a moment and then asked, Bet that was your first time racing against a satellite. That, she said with another slow nod, was definitely a first. Can't believe the plan actually worked. I mean, we never once saw it, but it was up there, you know, and for maybe just 1 second, we were aligned with it. Yeah, Darren responded. Just right, apparently. He gazed forward and tilted his head slightly. Definitely one for the records. Bekka was nodding in response. Won't be forgotten, he continued, grabbing his chin between his thumb and index finger. That's the first time I've ever been shot at. Pulling his hand away, he regarded her and added, Believe it or not. Bekka was still wearing her dopey smile in response when he then asked, What about you? Much into dodging bullets from killer drones? She laughed and had to look away. Reluctant to nod, she eventually had to, and answered, Actually, there have been a few times. Ah, Darren said, tilting his head back slightly, and then stating, Guess there's no submitting a complaint about it then, is there? Bekka chuckled in response. He was watching her when the door clicked, drawing both their attentions. When it opened, A tall man in a dark business suit was standing just outside the room. He was carrying a briefcase in his left hand. The soldier was the one who opened the door. He exchanged a look with the tall man and nodded. "Thank you," the tall man said, and stepped inside. He had dark skin, but his close-cut hair was graying on the sides. He stood upright before Bekka and Darren and brought the briefcase around in front of him, clasping the handle with both hands. Looking at each of them in turn with tired eyes, he didn't smile when he said, "So, Rosk Farron said you have something for me." Bekka and Darren shared a glance, grinned, and returned to the guy. "Mr. Klossev," Bekka said, stepping away from the table. She unzipped the pouch on the front of her suit and stuck her hand inside. The tall man watched as she pulled a small memory drive free. Before she handed it over to him, she said, "It's all yours." His tired eyes brightened slightly, and he received the drive with his right hand. Bekka and Darren watched him as he stared at the device. When he realized their eyes were on him, he looked at them both in turn again and cleared his throat. "Ah, yes," he muttered, gave Bekka a slight grin as he stepped around her and approached the table. He placed the briefcase next to Darren, who hadn't moved from his spot. There was a small panel beside the handle. Pressing his thumb against it, the panel turned green. The locks popped free, and he opened the briefcase. There was nothing inside, but the interior was layered with a foam coating. Classic, Bekka thought, having reclaimed her spot against the edge of the table. The guy placed the memory drive softly in the middle of the briefcase. When he closed it, the locks snapped back into place. "Well," he said, turning his head in both their directions, but never really making eye contact with them. He said, "So it is settled. I won't take up any more of your time then. I thank you both." He lifted the briefcase from the table and spun around. Without another word, he headed for the door that the soldier was still holding open. Stepping out of the room, he turned and disappeared down the hallway. The soldier was still facing Darren and Bekka as he backed out of the room. He extended his hand to the side and said, "You are free to go now." Bekka and Darren regarded one another. "Well," Bekka said, kicking one foot out and then hopping away from the table, "guess that's that." Darren raised his eyebrows and uncurled his arms. He shrugged as he moved away from the table. "A little anticlimactic, if you ask me." He extended his left arm ahead, offering Bekka to leave first. Bekka accepted his offer and left the room. As Darren stepped out into the hallway after her, he commented to the soldier still standing there, "At least we're still in one piece, right?" They were silent the whole way to the front entrance of the building and down the sidewalk outside. That same soldier had followed them up until they stepped onto the parking lot. The truck that escorted them was still there, but the one that had taken up the rear was gone. All the soldiers who had grouped around them before were now positioned nearby, no longer paying them any mind. So, Bekka thought, no more need for caution apparently. Darren mounted the bike and lifted his helmet from between the handlebars. When he looked at Bekka, she was turned away from him, scanning the parking lot. He decided to grab her attention by saying, "You are really good back there." She turned her head in his direction. Catching what he said, a grin oozed across her face. "Thanks for backing me up." "Hey, we're teammates, ain't we?" he said, and then chuckled. She snorted and looked over at her helmet, sitting on the back of the seat. "A little souvenir?" Darren asked. She turned to face him fully and clasped her hands behind her back. "You keep it, to remember me." As he twisted around and grabbed the straps to fasten the helmet in place, he said, "It's too bad you can't ride off into the sunset with me like the heroes we are, but..." And he darted his eyes from side to side before finishing with, "You gotta go back and check up on your mate. The poor fella." Lowering her head, she nodded. "Yeah." Lifting her head, she said, "It was nice to meet you." Securing the straps, he faced her and extended his left hand again. "You too, love. What a blast, right?" She snickered as she shook his hand. Then she stepped back, and he placed his helmet on. While he began fastening the chin strap, she said, "Be careful on your way out." Still messing with the chin strap, he looked at her out of the corner of the opened section of his helmet and replied, "Oh, don't you worry. Just another day." Taking his hands away from underneath his helmet, he grabbed the handlebars and added, "So long as you stay a fan of the races, I'm sure you'll see me again." He winked at her and then tapped the corner of his visor. It slid down into place as he jump-started the bike. There was that rumble in her toes again. It vibrated all the way up into her stomach. He balanced the bike upright, slipped the kickstand upward, and pumped the throttle several times. She beamed. He gave her a thumbs up and then circled the bike around her before taking it across the parking lot. Pausing at the entrance, the guards there signaled to him, and he drove out onto the road. She thought he would open the throttle all the way then and roar his way toward the bridge. There was no traffic entering or leaving the island, so he had the road all to himself, but apparently he was still trying to behave. Before the rattle of the bike's engine drifted away into the distance, the soldier who had followed them out approached her. "How come you didn't leave with him?" he asked. She looked over her shoulder and then turned about to face him. "Oh, I've actually got to catch the train out of here. Was hoping someone would be nice enough to give me a lift to the station." The soldier cast his gaze beyond her. She thought he might have been looking toward the eastern end of the island, where the train track entered from across the water. When he returned to her, he said, "I'm sorry, but the station is closed for the time being." "Oh," Bekka responded, "I didn't mean the one on the island." Pointing her thumb back over her shoulder, she added, "The one stop before the track leaves the mainland." He shot his gaze past her again, aiming it toward the bridge this time. When he returned to her, his brow creased. "That guy couldn't have taken you there?" She tossed her hands out to the sides and shrugged. He was headed in the opposite direction." The soldier's brow wrinkled in the middle. "Hey," someone called from her left. Both she and the soldier looked toward the truck that escorted her and Darren here. Another soldier was walking toward them from the driver's side of it. Lifting his right hand in a greeting, he said, "I can take her." As he approached, he noticed the creased look on the one soldier's face. "Oh, it's okay," he said, standing next to Bekka. "I've got to take the truck back to my post anyway. Might as well go a little further." The soldier with the creased expression didn't say anything. He just looked at them both in turn and then stepped away, heading back to the sidewalk. The soldier next to Bekka grinned and then nodded toward the truck. "Shall we?" "Thanks," she said, and followed him over to the vehicle. He opened the driver's side and offered his hand as she stepped up into the cab. Once she slipped over to the passenger seat, he stepped up and sat in front of the steering wheel. Closing the door, he fastened his seatbelt and cranked the engine. Because it was a military vehicle, there was a certain rumble that hummed throughout the frame, but it wasn't the same as with the bike. The driver took them to the parking lot's entrance, waved to the guards, and then entered the road. Once they were on the bridge, Bekka was actually glad to leave the island behind. Now, she had to figure out what to talk about the few minutes it would take them to reach the mainland. "So," the driver spoke up, and she wondered how well the small talk would go. "Tell me, did you make a wish?" Her eyes flashed wide, and she jerked her head toward him. He waited a second before he glanced her way, and then he continued to watch the road. With a grin, he said, "Your name is Bekka Summers. Or rather, That's what you go by during your missions." Bekka's shoulders sagged, and she slouched in her seat. Grinning, she replied, "And here I thought I was gonna have to get in touch with Mr. Rosk again once I got off the island." The driver smiled. "I take it that means you still have it, huh?" She unzipped the pouch on the front of her suit and said, "Yes, Mr. Klossev, I do." Reaching inside, she pulled the tablet free, extending it over the console between their seats. She finished with, "And yes, I was just fast enough to make a wish." He glanced at the tablet and then reached over to accept it. Bringing it over in front of him, he studied it and then muttered, "Counsel from the heavens." Bekka was watching him, as she thought she caught him trying to blink away tears. Then he sat the tablet in his lap. Reaching up with the same hand, he started to unbutton the front of his jacket. "I wasn't sure we would actually get to make this exchange, but then I figured you and your partner had something planned when he left by himself." "Just trying to throw the bad guys off a little," she explained. "Did we fall for their imposter or not? Know what I mean?" "I believe I do," Mr. Klossev answered. Bekka snickered. "That creepy feeling I got on the way inside, it was legit." "Felt eyes on you the whole time, huh?" Mr. Klossev asked. "So, were every one of those guys the opposition?" she asked. "Not all of them," Mr. Klossev said, slipping the tablet inside his jacket. Once secured, he started to button up the front. "But of course, they don't know that." "Ha!" Bekka laughed. "It's that cutthroat, huh?" "They don't know," Mr. Klossev began, "and we don't know, but then we do know, and they might know." "Geez," Bekka replied. "And," he continued, "thankfully none of them know what the infamous Klossev looks like. They've just heard of him, of course." "So," Bekka began, "an alias, or your turn to wear the mantle?" He chuckled. "You'd like to know, wouldn't you?" Bekka laughed and clapped her hands. "I love it." Mr. Klossev was grinning in response. Then he said, "But soon," and he patted the front of his jacket, "maybe we won't have to play these games anymore." Bekka considered him a moment, and then asked, "So, Mr. Rosk's uncle, that Myrick guy, he's really that important to you guys?" "Myrick Leshan is a man beloved by the people of Luthania," Mr. Klossev answered. "Though he is no longer with us, his last bit of counsel will affect us and generations to come." He sighed before finishing with, "Hopefully by that point, we will have established a constitution strong enough to thwart any others corrupted by their thirst for power over others." Bekka ran his words through her mind again, and then responded, "I always thought people like that were so immature." Mr. Klossev chuckled, and they rode the rest of the way in silence. Approaching the station, Bekka saw the employees first. They were spread out from the building's entrance to the wrecked van off to the right. Her heart ached at the sight of it. The front end was a mangled mess. The engine had exploded, or at least caught on fire. The hood was crumpled and pressed back into the shattered windshield. All 4 tires were flat, so the whole vehicle was sagging low to the ground. "He never said," she muttered, leaning forward in her seat. Mr. Klossev brought the truck to a halt a short distance away from the scene. The employees, looking their way, caught the slow wave he gave them, and they waved back. Then they went about what they were doing prior, which was inspecting the 2 drones laying on the ground not too far away from the wrecked van. "Where is he?" Bekka wondered aloud. "If he was injured," Mr. Klossev said, "he'll be inside. They have medical supplies in there." "Injured," she muttered, staring at the van while she felt for the door handle. Gripping it, she pushed the door open and looked back at Mr. Klossev. Thanks for the ride." "Oh, Miss Summers," Mr. Klosov replied. "Luthania thanks you." She paused, offered him a grin, and then stepped out of the truck. Once she closed the door, Mr. Klosov put it in reverse and backed off along the side of the road. Then he pulled forward and left the area. Bekka approached the van. The front end was still smoking, but the employees had doused it with their fire extinguishers. She could smell the burnt oil and fuel, but most of the shrapnel was coated in the white fire retardant. The driver and passenger doors were open. So was the big rolling door on the driver's side. She started to walk over and look in, but one of the employees spoke up. "It's still a little dangerous to go near it." She looked his way as he approached. "We helped him with what we could," he continued. "He wanted to salvage his equipment." He pointed his thumb back toward the station. "Set him up in the VIP lounge. One of our guys is tending to his wounds now." She tried not to show the pain that shot through her at that news, and studied the employee's face. The casual grin there reflected the calm exhibited by the others focused on the two drones. "Oh, don't worry," the employee said. "He informed us of this situation. Now we know why that train didn't signal us when they hurried by. For your involvement with Rosk Farron, Luthania thanks you both." Bekka's shoulders relaxed a little, but she needed to get inside the station. "Can I go inside and—" "Oh, yes, sure. Let me show you where he is," the employee responded. She followed him toward the station, watching the small groups of men kneeling over either drone along the way. The one closest to the van was still intact, though the employees had opened some of its compartments. Because of the gun turret underneath, it was laying at an angle. All 4 barrels were aimed at the other drone a few yards to the left of Bekka. The pieces of that one's mangled body were spread away from each other. One of the employees had set the gun turret section off to the side and cleared it of all the unspent ammunition. The other pieces of the drone were either warped or mangled, their edges blackened. She remembered Alex saying he took at least one of them out before switching them all off. She grinned and followed the employee inside the station. Down a hall along the left side of the building, the employee stopped and pointed to the only door that was open. "He's in there," he said, and chuckled, "with all his stuff." "Thanks," Bekka said, and walked the rest of the way by herself. She heard voices before she arrived, recognizing one of them. Slowing her pace, she eased up to the side of the doorway. Slipping into view, she caught the attention of the employee first. He was facing the front of the room. Seated to the right and facing the opposite way was Alex. His left arm was extended out to his side. The employee paused in wrapping his forearm in a bandage when he looked her way. His expression brightened, and he said, "I'm guessing that's her." He then snickered and added, "Her outfit gives her away." Alex turned in his swivel chair in the guy's direction so he could look toward the doorway. Then he grinned. "Ah, so you didn't forget about me." "Psh, whatever," she said, and entered the room. "The channel was still open, but you muted your end." Watching her approach, he replied, "Well, with the whole jamming thing going on, I guess I decided to wait." He chuckled then. She arrived at his side and watched the employee finish wrapping the bandage. His right hand was resting on the table in front of him and next to a laptop. Bandages wrapped around his palm and the back of his hand, but she saw the red marks they didn't cover. His trademark trench coat was laying behind the employee next to the open medical supplies box. So was his shirt. A large square patch was taped to the right side of his chest, and another bandage was laying across the bottom portion of his neck. There were scratches along his right cheek all the way up to his brow. Following her eyes, he decided to explain. Turns out exploding glass can do some damage. She looked from his jacket to his chest and snorted. What? Was that the one time you weren't wearing your jacket? Heh, I know what you're thinking, he said, but it wasn't enough to be pelted by tiny shards of broken glass. Seems those pieces had an easy time of slipping down underneath my jacket. He shrugged his left shoulder. Lucky me. Don't forget the slight burns on your face and hand, the employee said, twisting around to lay the remainder of the bandages on the table. Then he picked up a bottle of ointment and turned back to Alex. Before he started to twist the lid open, Bekka reached over and touched the bottle. It's okay. The employee paused and regarded her. I'll take over from here, she finished. The employee started to relinquish the bottle, but then picked up on her expression. His cordial grin shrunk down to a whispered, "Oh," that never left his lips. Taking his hand away from the bottle, he found his grin again and offered Alex a quick nod. You take care of yourselves, he said, and headed for the door. Bekka sat the bottle down and followed him. After seeing the employee out, she closed the door. The sound of the lock slipping in place echoed throughout the silent building. When she turned back around, she found Alex looking at her. After a few seconds, he grinned and said, Long time no see. She didn't respond. From one mission to the next, right? He asked. I at least got to physically take part in the... You never said it was that bad, she interrupted him. He blinked. What? She started toward him. With your van. You just said they shot up the front end. Well, yeah, he offered. You never said it exploded, she said, and loomed over him. Looking up at her now, he glanced toward the table, unable to suppress his grin. Oh, well, I guess I figured it was understood that. She stepped around and placed herself where the employee had been before she arrived. He looked up at her as she crossed her arms and shifted her weight onto one leg. His eyes flinched down to target her accented hip before finding her eyes again. Instead of glaring, a small curl was touching the corner of her lips. He remained silent. So, she began, you remembered our conversation about bike racing. His eyebrows went up. Remembered the name of my favorite racer, she continued. Somehow convinced him to take part in a dangerous mission. It helped that his partner for said mission was a petite but energetic brunette, Alex offered. The corner of her lips curled a little further. And the money, he added. She glanced over at the table and then moved to sit upon the edge. Uncurling her arms, she placed them on either side of her, letting her shoulders bunch up slightly around her neck. Alicia told me you were the one who brought this mission to her, she said. His grin shrank. Once you found out about the hacker Mr. Rosk used, she continued, you approached him. Just so you know, Alex interrupted her, he was the one who came up with the whole satellite idea. And together, she responded, you made all the calculations and laid out the plan. Sucking his lips inward, he nodded slowly. So, she continued, we actually aligned ourselves just right with a falling satellite? Glancing toward his laptop, he sat back in his seat before he explained. Well, I guess the best way to put it is that you were in its path, so it was a guaranteed connection. She arched an eyebrow. Explain. He shrugged his left shoulder before he responded. The satellite was always transmitting the file downward. It's just that no one knew it was up there doing that except us. But even if someone else did know and received the file, they won't be able to do anything with it. Only Rosk knew the password. So the company that owned the satellite couldn't open the file, she said. If they even found it, he responded. They wouldn't have been able to download it themselves, and not because they didn't know the password. It was a simplex type stream of data, since it was stuck in the queue, so to speak. They'd have to be right underneath the satellite, like you were, to obtain it. He grinned. But good luck with that, right? Her gaze lingered on him a moment, and then she looked away and shrugged. Well, Mr. Rosk signed off on it. Returning to him, she finished with, in order to stop a civil war. He waited for her to continue, but when she just sat there and stared at him, he asked, Am I in trouble? She stared at him a few more seconds, and then lowered her gaze. With a sigh, she glanced off to the side. Reaching up with her right hand, she found the zipper at the top of her suit's collar. You know what? It's hot in this thing. She started pulling the zipper down. Oh, well, Alex offered. Might wanna... He paused when she unzipped the suit down to the middle of her stomach. As the edges pulled away from each other, there was only so much space between them. The shirt she wore underneath should have been exposed. She paused before zipping further, letting him come to the realization that the fact that he couldn't see her shirt was because she wasn't wearing one. Now that this was established, she finished unzipping the suit all the way down. It stopped just over her groin. Now the edges opened wider above, exposing more of her bare skin. I promised myself, she said, reaching up with her right hand and grabbing the left edge of her collar, that I would thank you. As she pushed that side of her suit aside and off her left shoulder, he asked, For what? His eyes dropped down as soon as her left breast was revealed. For the last mission, she said, reaching up with her left hand to grab the right edge of her suit's collar. Pushing it aside and off her right shoulder, she continued, The protection you gave me. His eyes shifted over to her right breast once it was revealed. You know, she continued, that lotion. His eyes darted back and forth from her breast to her eyes. Yeah, I remember. Crossing her arms across her chest, she grabbed the edges of her suit and pulled them down to her biceps and along her forearms. Alex's eyes traveled down from her breast to the top of her belly, to her belly button, and on down. Pausing, she then used her right hand and pulled her left hand free of the glove and sleeve of her suit. Then she used that hand to free the other in the same fashion. When Alex thought that was all she was going to do, she used both hands to grip the sides of the suit, still wrapped along the lower part of her body. Then she pushed the material down her hips, stopping midway. It was enough, though, to show Alex she wasn't wearing anything below either. Unsurprisingly, his eyes were trained there just above her groin, where the suit stopped. He was shaken from his focus when she moved toward him. Reaching his knees, she widened her steps, causing him to bring his legs inward so she could waddle the rest of the way and press her belly against his chest. She had placed her hands on both his cheeks, but he didn't need coaxing and looking up into her face. Besides, his chin happened to be nestled between her breasts now. So yeah, she said, thanks. He grinned. I'm definitely in trouble. Glass didn't happen to fall into your pants, did it? She asked. Well, it's kind of crazy, he began, but with everything going on, I surprisingly didn't think to check. Well then, she whispered, guess we'll have to do that. She hunched down and kissed him first. Remember that the links to the previous stories in this audiobook series are available below, along with my Ko-Fi link and my website where you can find all of my printed novels and ebooks.